Cheers, everybody, and welcome to your favorite late night Friday night hashcast. It is Variables, episode 55. We are your hosts, Fergoli and Superior Buds. We've got our returning guest, Racer X, down there. What is this, number 3, 2, 3, 4?
I think three.
Okay, nice. You might be the first third-time
Always
guest.
welcome.
There we go.
And our special guest tonight is Amy from highspy.io. We're going to dive into that momentarily, but Amy, you just want to give us a brief introduction about yourself, please?
Yeah. So I've been a medical user for the past couple of years now, and really what I do with cannabis at this point is, what if finding cannabis in the legal market didn't have to suck? What if it wasn't a terrible experience? This is really the best quick summary I can give you, I think. There's so much to dive into with that.
Yeah, we're
statement.
gonna break that down hard. I'm gonna introduce how I found out about you. And this was, well, it must have been within 12 days ago. I got a message from my buddy Big Jar Grows, and he's always DMing me topics for the show, which I shout out to him because I love that. And you know, anyone's welcome to do that. In fact, this is a multi-streaming show. We're on X, we're on Twitch, we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify after the show, and wherever you get your podcasts. So if you're in the chat, live chat right now, it's coming in. All those streams are coming in on us at the back end. So we'll get your questions in here for Amy and the panel. But so this is about 12 days ago. I got a message from Big Jar Grows, and it was just a link. And this link goes to Reddit. And so I click on the link to Reddit, and I'm met with this screen. And it says Michigan Cannabis Market Trends, November 24. And yeah, Racer's already shaking his head. I know Superior gets it too. It's like, this is right up my alley, you know, because I have essentially weekly meetings about this kind of stuff. And so I scrolled down, and I'm like, all right, highspy.io. Like, quite frankly, at that point, I hadn't heard of it. But anything that says Michigan Cannabis Market Trends has got my attention. So scroll down, and it's got these two different brands. Hit the top 10 concentrate products. Are these brands or products? Correct.
So those are brands.
Okay.
There's I try to have the distinction between brands by sales volume and top selling product or SKU by sales volume, because both are interesting as a consumer, you know.
Absolutely. I'm gonna go ahead and share this. Let's see if we can. There we go. All right, and then we've got ProGrow replaces Local Grove in top flower brands. Road Trip hits top 5 by sales and pre-rolls. And so I like, right as I jumping into this, I start seeing this infographic all beautifully laid out. I'm like what is highspy.io? You know, I'm like, how have I not heard of this? And thankfully, I have great friends who are a little bit more attached to this industry and have their ear to the ground, so to speak. And I see this product sales by category, and I read the monthly reports from the CRA. We go over them a lot on the show. And so, when I see flower as big as it is, this pie chart at 56.5%, I'm not really surprised by that. That's kind of as expected, right? I know that kind of tracks. The pre-rolls I know are usually, pre-rolls or vapes are usually the second biggest. So those kind of make sense. So I'm like, all right, this data looks pretty good. I see concentrates. All right, the top brands I assume here. So 710 Labs, I know they've been making a big splash in the metric market for the last year or so. Canalicious, go down to Wojo, who I was just talking to someone else about, like right before I saw this link. I'm like, sweet, Wojo made the list. I know he's a caregiver trying to do things right. And just this data, I love it. I mean, we got top selling products, edibles, flower. Now, I notice what's missing from this, and I think you actually mentioned this here in your post. You're going to answer some of these questions that I want to ask you, and I had as I'm scrolling through this, right? So it says, where does this data come from? Do you want to answer that in your own words? I mean, I know these are probably your own words right here, but
those are all my words. So the gist of the tool is, you look at Weed Maps, you look at Dutchie or other dispensary menus. You have to go really menu by menu, store by store, as a consumer, I really started asking myself, why am I wasting my time on this? This is painful. Some of these menus are so terribly slow. I'm a programmer as a day job, right? And so my intuition is I can do better, and we deserve better as consumers in this industry. So, it started out really for me. I was a medical user. I just whipped up a thing, scrape a couple menus near me, post in my private Discord server. I get alerts when there's products available. And then it kind of grew from there because it's, oh, there's this new product I might be interested in, a new strain, a new brand, whatever else. Well, maybe I want to see where it's located around me. Maybe I want to see all the stores that carry it, not dig menu by menu. And
So
so it
is this
turns into
something you initially created for yourself, you're saying?
yes. Yep.
I
It
love
was
it. I love
it was for
programmer
just me to
brains.
start.
This is
And
what we do
so
with
I
programmer
know.
brains. We just start
Engineering
coding shit
mindset.
and collecting data, and next thing we
yep,
know,
yep. And so the way the tool works is instead of searching through dispensary menus one by one, you search, say, I don't know, you pick a strain name, you type it in, every menu near you that's visible on the map that has that strain, those products show up. So now it's not look at this dispensary or two dispensaries near me. It's see them all near me, and I can price shop. I can shop by stock. I can
Okay,
see
okay, okay.
did they
You're
jack the
getting too
price
deep. You're
up?
getting too deep. Hold
I'm
on. Put on the
sorry.
brakes.
I get
I
excited. I'm
don't
sorry.
worry. I'm going to show the website,
Hmm.
and I just want to kind of tell us from
Yeah.
honestly my perspective on how I stumbled upon this, so to speak,
Hmm.
because it is such a great tool, and and I want to give it every credit it deserves. And people should know this isn't some form of like paid advertisement show or anything like that. That's part of why I'm telling the story, because I literally stumbled upon this less than 2 weeks ago, and it kind of blew my mind. And the more I dug into it, the more I was surprised to find out this is like started in Michigan, right? Like this isn't
Hmm.
like a national weed maps competitor or anything like that, or it didn't start out that way. Maybe it started out as a tool for yourself, which is
Yep.
awesome. So this data, the first question up here is, where's the data come from? It's from you, right? It's from this
Yep.
tool that you created, scraping menus, collecting all that data, and converting it into something that's useful. The next question though is, how accurate is it? And this says, to the best of my knowledge, the data presented here is accurate. With that said, I'm still refining my data analysis, and it will hopefully get more accurate, only more accurate over time. Um, so this is where I want to scroll, because one of the things that was missing on here, in my opinion, is some numbers, right? Like
Yep.
I'm a graphics guy. I love beautifully laid out graphics like this that give me the information in a very clear and clearly stated manner. But it seems kind of like there's like half the data is missing. Like I got the name, but where's the number, right? Um,
Hmm.
I think you answered that. Yeah, right here. I ran out of
Yep.
space on the infographic. Design is hard. I I don't believe you, Amy. Who's making
Well,
this is
I swear to God, the actual numbers are actually covered up by the top selling product boxes. There are numbers, they just end
I,
up getting covered up because of the density of information.
there's this thing called layers, right? And then just send to
Hmm.
back or bring
Yeah,
forward.
just it was
you don't understand how
difficult to get
programmers
it
build shit,
nice.
man.
Yep.
Like you
Look,
I'm
start with
not a
the
graphic
data and you
designers
click on
versus
the
programmers, that fight's never going to end. But
yeah.
you got to understand, we now
I
have like a Pokedex for like what pricing is across the entire licensed market. It's okay if we miss a couple of text boxes. That is fine.
But
um,
that's the information my brain needs to know, though. It's like, well, but how much, or what is that price point, right?
yeah.
But I'm gonna probably answer this for you, so you don't have to. Um, well, I guess you kind of did here. I'm a business user. Can I get access to this data? You said reach out via email. I've learned there's a surprising amount of business use cases and would love to learn more. I mean, there's an
Yep.
incredible amount of use cases here. Just don't sell it all to only House of Dank or only Loom or something like that. Please don't let them capture you.
So
So
that's something we'll definitely come back to. I have thought deeply about that, what you just said. And there's actually some very interesting things that have come of that sort of thing that we'll absolutely have to circle back to later because it gets surprisingly deep.
I can imagine.
But so to answer your question about the actual numbers a bit more thoroughly, part of it was really just these are estimates from data that I have gathered. I don't want brands to be like, why are you slandering me on Reddit, making my sales numbers look lower than they are? So part of it is
That's
just trying to
valid.
protect myself.
Okay, but there's always disclaimers that you put on there, and sure, maybe you
Mhm.
need to consult with a lawyer to, make that legit or
Yep.
whatever. But at the same time, if they're concerned that the data is wrong, why don't they open their books and then give you the accurate data? And then now we're really talking,
Well,
Mhm.
that's kind of the razor's edge. Not to speak for Amy or your problem here is it's like you're dealing in data that's publicly available to the consumer. It's just available in a very inconvenient fashion through a number of vendors. You named one of them, and there's like 2 or 3 others that websites can use to list your menu. But a part of what you're doing is you're putting a sign on your door that says the Jeter is worth $15, or the Jeter is worth $13, the Jeter is worth $18, and those prices are getting filed along with all your competitors, right? But it's not like you're releasing the information to the public and not your competitors. You're actually, you're putting it in the public. This is information that's openly available, even though the owners of that information don't necessarily want, the fact that they charge $2 more for a SKU than their competitor 5 miles away. They want to preserve that sort of presentation of information as much as possible to preserve their customer. And certain vendors for those menus, those software menus, are more than willing to say, "Oh, of course, yeah, we'll make it a pain in the ass for you to go and like check that price of one option with your competitor. We'll make it so it's so full of friction that no one will realize it." What's beautiful about this tool that Amy's built here is that that's dissolved. That's gone. Like if you have a low number, you have to put it out there, and it's along everybody else's. Like it's very cool, but it is treacherous a little bit because there's a lot of money involved with like you mentioned a name of a dispensary and like a couple of others. They have a lot of interest in making sure that these menus are not necessarily comparative, but from the end user's perspective, this is gold. This is the
100%.
best option that you can have for like finding exactly what you want. And that's why I think this effort's so honorable, why Amy's so cool, and why this like application needs further projection, because it's not, Amy is seemingly quite cautious about where the money comes from, and I think that is desperately what this industry needs is more of that, where you're taking a tool and you're not corrupting it by saying, okay, well, one dispensary can buy preference on it, kind of like how Yelp works, or certain other services. It's why I think like this is one of the most honorable things going on in the game right now, and why there's so much tension around it is because there's a lot of value in being able to present those menus to each other.
What kind of, well, I was going to ask about you for the feedback you've gotten so far, Amy, but let's save that for later because I think it's time to kind of introduce this to our viewers here. And one of my favorite, well, one of the things I harp on a lot about dispensaries, and sometimes it's, well, a lot of times it's their fault, but a lot of times it's just the situation of the market. The fact that so much of their product, especially flour, but edibles too, are so old, and it's not fresh. It could be considered quite degraded by some standards, and maybe even inedible when it comes to some of those. But that's one of these warnings I see all over this in red text. Please don't change that or only make it bigger.
It's important.
It's a definite good piece of useful info that you can gather from this.
Yeah.
That was one of the first pieces that stood out to me.
Okay.
The price shopping is awesome, but old product is gold.
And okay, so this is, I opened this up in an incognito tab so you can get the kind of fresh start of what this is. Yes, we're all 21 and I understand. This is another thing that blew my mind. I thought this was just a Michigan thing until I kind of dug into it a little bit more. Yeah, how many states are on here already? You've
I
even
think-
got Hawaii on here.
37, I think. I think Nebraska voted for medical recently, so I got to get them added. But I try to cover every single legal market in the country.
Not Alaska yet. Why not Alaska?
Oh, it's big, and I'm still trying to figure out the right areas to really look for all the dispensaries, because there might be one out in the middle of nowhere. There might not be, and that affects figuring out by location where a lot of the stores are. Alaska's been on the list, but there's been so many other priorities lately.
Okay, I'm glad to know it's not like they just got too many ones and zeros up there to handle or something.
I was gonna say, isn't that like 30 or sorry, isn't that like 70% of the country that you have mapped out at this point?
Well,
And you're complaining about Alaska for really. You're complaining about
it's
you're
the
complaining about
biggest
text
one.
in the infographic.
It's
and you're complaining about the
misrepresented.
lack of
It's so
Alaska.
small. It could fit
California,
inside of
New
Texas.
York's on there.
On this
Michigan's
map, it
on
could fit
there.
inside of Texas. It's misrepresentative. I'm sorry to my northern friends. Underrepresented too, even. Anyways, I'm very
Sorry.
impressed. I had no idea, and I guess let's dig in. Someone give me a zip code. That's 4824. Let's try that one. Is that not a legit one?
Come on, little
49201.
tool, I believe in you.
Something I've talked to both of you guys about is the Jeter problem. Not a problem, but just like something that, because this is a grow-centric podcast, right? Everyone here is generally part of production side of this industry. But most people are honorably flower focused. But this app does kind of point out something that isn't really fun to talk about in this industry. And that is like, infused pre-rolls are kind of king right now. Those things are moving like crazy.
Oh yeah.
And that is the antithesis of like craft growing. And I don't know, it's this tool will give you a wake-up check or wake-up call in terms of like what's going on in the industry, like what's moving, what's not. So if you're looking for products, see how much Jesters are or Jeters are or Jesters like across the different markets, because they're sold everywhere.
Yeah,
right?
well, remind me and we'll do that here. This is kind of like the tooltips that come up as you go, just giving you the kind of walkthrough. So search for products here. This could be a strain, a brand, or even just 10 milligram edible, which I think that's cool. It's just like we're just going on keywords here. We don't have to be like too crazy specific or anything. So these are the results of your search. Tap on a result to see more information about it. This includes things like description, strain name, price history, and more. And then we've got this button to show and hide filters. This lets you specifically choose what you're looking for, like brand, form, weight, or specific dispensary. We can drag the map to see results in more locations. Zooming in and out will also show the results in the area you're looking at. The map will show you up to 100 dispensaries at a time. I mean, do we even need to shop that many? That's awesome. That's a lot. Tap a marker to show what dispensary it is and to filter results to just that dispensary. You can share your search results from here. Well, I could share them. This will give you a short link to share with friends or save for later. That's convenient. Now, are there profiles on this yet?
It's in the pipeline.
Okay.
And we'll actually come back to that too.
Yeah, I could see like a wish list being a very, or like, Amazon shopping list kind of style.
Favorites.
Yeah. And then need help or just like watching prices. Like maybe I want an alert when the price of
we will be
Fagroli
coming
drops
back to that too.
or
Don't
making
worry.
comment sections on batches. So like if someone drops something, there's a comment section associated with that 50-pound batch as it goes through the market.
Ooh, yeah, related to metric numbers or something.
Believe it or not, we're coming back to that too if we have time.
Wow, we're gonna have episode 2
I'll
here
shut up.
soon, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so
This is the problem with programmers. We just keep coming up with stuff, and feature creep is a real deal.
that's fair. That's fair. All right, so we're in Jackson, Michigan. It looks like we've got maybe 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, to about a dozen dispensaries or so around here. What was that we want to look up? Do we want to look up Jeters? Or do we want to look up something else? Racer, give me something to look up.
I mean, Jeters are going to be a good market indicator, but I'll tell you what. Let's go Lansing here. How about Eastside Alchemy? How are they doing around Jackson?
East Side Alchemy.
They're neighbors right up the street from here in Lansing.
All right, so we've got some BOGO 2 for $100 rosin, Eastside Alchemy Live Hash rosin, Blueberry Rain. It's at Jars in Jackson. They have 6 in stock. So look at all this information we're getting, right? The fact that it's a potentially new product, which is cool to see that. I haven't even noticed that. I saw old product warnings, which is probably more valuable, I would say, but new product warning is kind of also awesome. That's just like an added benefit, right? Right, exactly. Kind of can verify it that way. You got prices, you got sales and deals up here, you got quantity and stock, which I've got to ask, how are you getting that information?
Yeah.
Don't tell me you've got spies around the state dropping in on dispensaries and they're all pretending to be stoners, but they're really counting stock as a
when you look at a dispensary menu, usually you can choose, I want to add 2 or 3 or more to my cart. And this is from what I found talking to different business users. This is usually a reflection of what the dispensary has on the shelf that the consumer can purchase. There are exceptions to that rule, of course, but as a rule of thumb, this is a reflection of what is on the shelf at the moment this was scraped.
And a lot of this comes or kind of starts with from the dispensary side of things. They're entering their inventory, which is they're required to do, right? But they might be entering it into, say, Metric, and that system might then feed into their like a point of sale system, and then that point of sale system might then feed into like Weed Maps or whatever, right? It's kind of all somewhat integrated. I know it can be a really terrible pain in the ass to start integrating, one app with the next, but I think ultimately that's about how it goes right now, right? Okay. So
it's somewhat, I mean, I want to clarify on that end because I've seen the back end of it when you're dealing with something like one of the not to name a specific one, but one of the vendors, right? Like when you put your inventory in, you have the option to either tie it in directly to a database you already use, whether that's Metric, whether that's, another inventory management system, or you can say, hey, I've got 25 of these in stock. And I only want to get notified that I'm low stock if I sell more than 25 of them in a day, right? And so you may have, let's say, 250 in stock, but you're only going to tell Dutchy, for example, that there are 25 available because that's how many are reported on the floor in the dispensary that day. Now, in the back of the house, they might have another batch of 225 that they're pulling from, but they may only report to the online systems or to their menu that they have 25, right?
They do the opposite with low stock as well, where they'll pull it from the menu before they run out.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep. I know that.
There'll be like a buffer.
Okay.
Yep.
But it's still super useful because as far as like that trending of what's in stock is concerned, like Amy's tool, HiSpy, tracks that. So you can see how much has moved over time and see if like it's a steep curve or not. And that's from a business perspective, it's huge. And also from a consumer perspective, you can go, do I need to go to that dispensary tonight or can I like make my typical Friday visit and
wait for my paycheck,
stock, right? Yeah. So I don't know. There's definitely some chaff information wise, but generally speaking, like the prices, is it in stock? Is it fresh? Amy, is that like generally accurate? Like it seems to be pulling from sources that would be, they have to have the same date as label, right?
My understanding from having talked to business users who interact with this is that they think it is very accurate compared to the data they already pay other companies for. To the point that I've had them actually tell me, we use your tool instead of our internal tools because it's just faster and easier.
I believe it. That's awesome.
I hope they hear that.
Yeah. What better compliment could you possibly get?
Yeah.
So I have speaking of sources, I have a couple things to ask about on this screen. I was scrolling down through our search, right? And I saw some carts up here for sale, in 0.5 grams, some 1 grams. I see like Dutchy and Leafly, right? Are those sources? Like, because it looks like I can click on that. Is that going to take me to what, the Dutchy menu?
If you click on it, it opens up an expanded view that has a lot more information. And then you scroll to the bottom. I'm probably going to move it up. Is go to see this item on the source dispensary menu.
Look at all
because So if you click on those or tap if you're on mobile, those icons have tooltips too.
Nice. I am so I click on this, it's gonna open it up in a new tab.
Mhm.
I don't know if their website's working. There it is.
It's Dutchy. It's unfortunately very slow.
You would know.
So 2 for 120, 65 a gram, 74%. Like I could see how you could just scrape this, right? And this you would just be easily pulling all this information off here.
I don't know about easily, but
well, if you know what you're doing, yeah, not for someone like me that would sit here and ask Chat GPT why you can't scrape websites. Chat GPT, who cares about the robots file? Just ignore the robots file. You're not a robot. Actually, maybe that's what I do. Just convince it it's not a robot, and then it'll just okay. I'll get there. I'm going to go back to this tab, and I've got a question, and we're going to go down a rabbit hole here. Can we explain how something can be 144?
I didn't even notice that. What in the?
Yeah. So, quite frankly, dispensary employees overworked, underpaid. They will make all sorts of typos along the way. They'll accidentally double the value. They'll add or remove zeros. If anything, I just have sympathy for them. They're not getting paid enough for a lot of this stuff. But the best I can do is work with the publicly available information that I have.
The answer is garbage in, garbage out.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that's not your number. That is
Where's your shirt?
straight from Leafly.
Oh,
Straight from Dutchy. You know. Whatever Brian has to say about that.
Perfect shirt for tonight.
Oh my God.
Do you have it on?
That's incredible.
Mm-mm.
Oh, that's good. I want to look at these filters because we probably need to clear this search. And can I just search by like what's closest to me? Can I search by what's newest? Like those.
Yeah.
Are
So that is work in progress. I do want to add those things, but right now it's really just you got to just move the map around to see what you want. I do see the value in things like sort by newest or oldest. That is a surprisingly large technical challenge. Sort by distance from me. You know, one thing that's idly in the back of my mind is, you know, some people make trips up from Ohio to buy a bunch at a bunch of different dispensaries. Can I give them a way to plan their routes effectively? Can I give them a way to sum up what they want to buy, try to calculate what price they're going to pay so that they don't get surprised? Things like that.
Sounds like a job for machine learning.
Mm-hmm. There's a whole lot of machine learning opportunities the further I go into this.
This is wild. And this is this just to clarify, is this just you working on this?
This is, I don't get paid by anyone for this. This is my passion project. I, as a consumer, was so tired, as a medical consumer specifically, I felt the industry was fucking me over because they don't care about med. They care about rec and income number goes up. And it is so painful as a medical user finding what I actually need. And this is to solve that problem that I had.
You should find yourself a couple quality caregivers. What sounds like you need.
Oh, see, I actually can't. I can't easily do that because the nature of my disability, I can't get out of the house easily. I have a degenerative nerve condition, so I can't drive. I can't really bike. I can't really walk. Like a mile walk just to get to the pharmacy for my meds is almost impossible. So,
I think an understanding caregiver would make sure they got that to you.
So I agree. Don't get me wrong,
it's hard
but
to find, huh?
there's that. I have to know the right people. I have to actually see their product and understand, is it going to do what I need? And then there's a whole other conversation that we'll have to get into about how I personally use and experience weed.
Well, and you can't do this with caregivers, can you? You know what I mean? Like,
I don't think I could legally have caregivers on this, unfortunately.
Well,
I would love to help with that.
Yeah, but even just like collecting that data and keeping that accurate, like there's no there's no caregiver like websites to scrape even. You know, it's
you make a Telegram version of this is doing numbers. But
didn't Telegram just get?
Telegram
cannabis just got shut down.
Signal.
Right?
Don't use Telegram. I shouldn't say that.
No, I know. I know it was a joke, but like that was just a recent thing.
This,
Oh no, massively.
This is interesting to me. It really shows you the power
Mhm.
of Dutchy in comparison to the others,
So
and
it
why don't I
really
see weed
depends
maps
state
on
by
there?
state. So, oh, weed maps, I hate them. They actively, aggressively fight scraping. And I was like, all
Yeah.
right, message received. Bye.
Oh yeah, all
But
my
so
homies hate weed
there
maps.
are about nine different menu providers supported because there's a lot of smaller dispensaries or dispensaries that just happen to have made a different choice. They're like, hey, why aren't we showing up? We want people to find us.
How is Trees.io to deal with? Because I'm noticing like
I am not a big fan of them, but I made it
really?
work because I got requests.
Okay. Yeah, because I notice a lot of the smaller batch guys are going with
Mhm.
them versus going with Dutchy. And yeah, like
Um,
I was just wondering if they were a little bit more open or a little bit more closed. That sucks
there's
to
a few
hear.
other smaller batch ones, like not small batch, but smaller providers like Blaze.me, Trees.io you just mentioned, Swede,
Mhm.
Carrot, Portal 42, and I think one other I'm forgetting.
Yo, shout out Anarchy. You just scrolled by it. Sorry. Homeboys hash. Anyways. But yeah, those like because you're the impressive thing about this is that you're scraping from what 10 plus providers likely plus
9
like
right
probably
now.
some 9. Yeah, and like that's like to get the idea of like what it means for scrapings. It does seem to be a cat and mouse game. Most of the audience is growers, not a lot of them are programmers. But
Mhm.
like and I'm not a programmer by any appreciable means, but the concept, as I understand it, is you're essentially training something to look at a web page multiple times and read the information on it, parse it, put it into a database, and then present it however you want.
Mhm.
But the process of getting that information, because it's valuable, like we talked about earlier, like Weedmaps and Dutchy have their own interests. They kind of put roadblocks in the way to do that,
Mhm.
and they don't make it easy for computers to read that information. And you're doing the Lord's work by like just saying screw that. We're gonna collaborate and take all this public information and put it on a
Mhm.
centralized Craigslist for weed. So I don't know. It shouldn't be understated how much effort goes into doing what you're doing right now, and that like you stated humbly that you're not making money off of this, and you and I have privately gone back and forth in it, but Popco, are you asleep? Are you fucking blind? Anyways, so I'm glad that you're not thinking about like growers or anybody like that, but hardware manufacturers, DL Wholesale comes to mind. Like,
Yep.
I really hope people start like banging down that door in ways that they
Yeah,
ought to. And I'm
so
really happy that I've heard that you're also
I
being
can
very
actually
cautious about
address that
marijuana.
now.
Can
So
you?
I don't want to name any names, but a number of businesses see the value and have outright said, I don't want to affect how you're running this because I see the value for us as businesses and the consumer market. I just want to give you money, get data back that I can then use as actionable insights into the market. How am I selling? How are my competitors selling? Where do I might maybe want to focus more? Where might I want to send my salespeople? And that
Yeah.
is, I cannot stress this enough. That is for the most part trivial to give them with what I have.
That's like
It's
just a
just a matter of,
dashboard. That's
Mhm.
the profile in the
Oh,
dashboard, right? Like,
not even a dashboard. It is horrifying. The single biggest request, please, for the love of God, just let me export a spreadsheet, put it into Excel. And again,
yeah,
that
they
is
want it in their own
trivial.
system.
I have that built. I'm happy to let people export that data. I am just going through the legal and regulatory bits right now to make sure I can. Because it's infuriating how bad the industry is for not just the consumers, but the businesses trying to understand. I've heard stories in other states. One of the best producers from seed to sale, they didn't know they were one of the top brands in their state because they had no insight. How could they know?
hmm
Yeah. I mean, on metric, a lot of it is like there's so much data that the state requires you to track, but at the end of the day, you ain't seeing dick. Like you're not seeing
Yeah.
anything when you're making the sales. Like, thankfully, there's a couple of retail partners who've been open enough to share spreadsheets about customer data, but you don't get that 9 out of
Mhm.
10 times. It is mostly you're putting out a product. You're like you grow a crop, you put it out there, and your feedback is really only what you see on social media. And we all know how that goes. That doesn't show up in your feed voluntarily. You have to seek it out. I remember someone showing me a post of someone smoking our product, and it was from months ago. The post, and I was like, how did I not see this? Everything associated with my feed should be showing me like this, but it's not. And you seem to like, you feel alone at sea sometimes, and then you hop on a high spy and you're like, oh no, there's 6 available here, there's 5 available here. This is exactly how things are going, where the price is going. It's a beautiful level of insight that this tool can provide for people on the growing license side. Super excited to see it grow, in the short period of time that I've experienced it.
I want to ask this question while we're on the kind of sort of money topic, and talking about whether, I guess, vendors, clients, customers, investors, all that kind of stuff. I fully expect that this number will change 2 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, however long, it's going to keep going up. But let me turn around real quick. All right. I'm Mr. Businessman. I walk in the door with a suitcase full of money. Amy, I really like what you got here. I think there's some real value and ability to grow this product you've developed here. I want to keep you on and have you continue to grow this. I'm going to give you the team of developers to work with and a whole graphics department. You don't got to worry about that no more. And we'll get you set up with the best AWS servers or whatever. I don't going to start talking about things I don't know, but but the main thing is I got this briefcase here with I don't know, $2 million in it. How do you feel about signing some paperwork, Amy?
They don't have enough money for that. Straight up.
Damn right, and don't talk about price on this podcast.
So what I do,
it's all hypothetical. Jeez.
Oh yeah, but so the whole point of what I'm doing, this is an industry that traditionally doesn't seem to have had much, if anything, in the way of transparency. And especially as a consumer, it's really guess and hope and pray. But is that really how it should be? I see the value in what I'm doing from what I've heard from all sorts of people who've used it. There is transparency, and I refuse to take money, be that investment, a business contract, anything, from any company, any individual that wants to force me to compromise on it, because that's not how it should be.
I applaud that. I mean,
damn right.
So to actually go a step further with that, we were looking at that infographic earlier, right? I don't want to name brands. I don't want to shame anyone because a lot of these people are decent people. One company that's in the top selling categories for pre-rolls was like, hey, we have seen success with putting ads elsewhere. Would you consider that? Immediately, no, absolutely not. That will completely dilute the purpose of what I'm doing. Because if I'm artificially boosting some company or some brand in search results, that casts doubt on all the other data that I provide. And their response was, that's great. I love that that's how you think, because it shouldn't be skewed for the consumers. We like it because it helps us make money, but people still need that transparency, and not compromising on that is that important.
Yeah, the whole boosting engagement and algorithmically deciding what you're going to see. Like, I haven't used Facebook in well over a decade. I think it's been 12, 13 years. But back in my day, it was like literally chronological, it was very basic, and it felt very intuitive, and it's, from my understanding, has fallen far from that. And but you can see it in every app we use. It's they're all the same.
Facebook and Instagram are both horrible about that.
Yeah,
I actually enjoy the X algorithm right now. Like, my For You page on X, as long as I just look at cannabis shit and like cannabis stuff, I have a great For You page. I find so many new different creators, small creators, large. It's been cool just to see growers. And there's a large exodus every time people get deleted on IG. You get influx of people.
Mhm.
Like,
Well,
oh,
then
look,
you've got the For You tab, but then you also have which is kind of like your discovery,
Mhm.
what's on X tab. But then the following tab, that is chronological, isn't it?
yeah, it's much better over there. Just a
It-
lot cleaner.
Yeah.
X is nice, especially with or like the less aggressive stance with cannabis. Who could have seen this coming? But
Right.
I wanted to ask one question, Amy, if you don't mind answering it publicly. Like, where do you draw the line between church and state in terms of like admissible money? Because I know that you are likely very focused on this customer survey tool right now and not thinking too much about money, and that's probably for the best. But I mean, we're all sitting here curious, wounded by the cannabis industry in our own ways, but like wondering how do you plan to make sure that this is available for us in 8 years, right? Like
Yeah.
how is this, and like with Puffco specifically, right? Like that's one that is been bounced around my head and discussing with you, or something like Josh Kesselman over at Raw. Like these are things that I mean, Raw does touch plants in certain areas, but Puffco seems to know that as soon as they step in with a garden, they start to influence things in a negative way and disturb the force. Like, what doesn't disturb the force for you in your mind?
Yeah. So kind of two parts to that. You had mentioned Puffco and Raw. I'm sure they're great people, great companies. I do actually have a Puffco device here, haven't used it in a bit, but I still wouldn't take money from them as an advertising game or something because it's not about are they touching the plant? It's about the interaction with cannabis overall. A lot of these dispensaries, they sell gear, they sell these devices, they'll sell glass and quartz rigs, whatever else. And so again, that's a company might be invisibly putting their thumb on the scale. I don't want that. That's the opposite of what I'm trying to achieve. And then the other side of it is I do want this to still be around. It is a significant monthly cost for me that I pay out of pocket to keep it running. But I have had multiple larger businesses. I don't want to name anyone just because I don't want to. Some of these companies have given me very useful information about the industry, and I want to respect the privacy of my contacts there. But they have literally said, we don't want to put our thumb on the scale. We want to pay you so we can get this data that none of our existing data brokers will give us, that Dutchie won't give us because we're not able to get it from them. They're still new to the data game, things like that. Because even just this really basic, let me search for my SKUs, see the stores they're at, export a spreadsheet of them. That is something they can't really easily get at this point in time. And that alone, they will happily pay for that. There's a point I've heard so many times. And at that point, I can do all of that. I am waiting on legal and regulatory compliance concerns right now, just to be cross my T's, dot my I's. And from that alone, that pays the bills. Why would I need the invisible thumb on the scale?
That's honestly really relieving to hear that like there exists a model where you can sell the data raw and that you don't necessarily have to sell the stage, right? And you can keep the product that's customer facing and pure, and the fact that it is so transparent is what makes it so valuable to the people who are paying on the business side. That I think that's brilliant, and I know that's going to pan out long term. That I'm glad to
So
hear it. Sorry to push the Puffco thing, but
you're
like,
good. That's
yeah,
okay. I do want to give a bit of clarity on that. Preserving the consumer tool how it is critically important to me because that's not just the consumer tool. That's business users see it. They share it around. They have that, oh shit, this is valuable. That's the hook for them almost. And then I can say, hey, you use the tool, you love it. I can offer you these extra features on top of what you know and love. Be that I just search for something, let me export a spreadsheet. Be that let me see a heat map maybe of where are my products selling more or less so I can have a quick ad hoc visualization in our meetings, whatever else. Because I've been horrified these last few months learning how little this is available to the industry. It's horrible. People are frankly suffering in all sorts of ways. And for what? Who benefits other than a handful of
Metric,
companies
the
and their
CRA,
investors?
Yeah, I can think of a few,
Oh,
but
man.
you know, the CRA has a ton of data. Metric has a ton of data. But
Mhm.
why do we have to FOIA it out of
No.
them essentially? You know, it's like they give us just these vague results on these monthly reports that we're just have to accept, you know, and
Mhm.
how the
Those numbers
prices
based on what too? Like
exactly, you
in
know what I mean?
metric.
It's
Mhm.
70
Okay.
73.99 an ounce of flour. It's like, well, you know, that's the average. Are we sure?
Oh man.
You know what, you know, and like what flour are we talking? Like it's just there's such little information there. It seems like a
Mhm.
lot, but it's
But
really so little.
but
Yep.
think of that from any other industry though. So think of that from alcohol. Can you go and look up data on brands and what sold and from what stores? Like you're talking about very proprietary data that is not available in most industries.
Is that true? Because you can carbs. Think about it.
Now,
Like I can
That
go to a
bigger
was for
purchases
centralized
are
product too.
website and I can go look at every single dealership in my area
I mean,
and
Auto
see
Trader's
exactly
trying to
what
do
their
that, right?
inventory is, what their price is.
but you have
You
you have a
Cars.com.
know,
large deal going with Ford or whoever in those type of instances where you're in an automotive network. It's a whole different. That's a different. Automotive's a different ball game, right? Same
auto
with same
parts,
with
Facebook Marketplace.
housing is a different ball game, right? Because
That's
that's
fair.
public
Yeah.
data,
All
right?
right, think commodity then, because liquor is not a
Grocery
good one
stores.
because well, think about products that are like okay, so how is she getting her data? It's online publicly available menus, right?
Yep.
So what kind of industries or what kind of you know, storefronts are putting their physical products that they have in their brick and mortar storefront also online using the same inventory database management system, right? I don't know
That,
how many are
that's
doing that, but
that's what I'm saying, though. I'm not saying anything about her product. I'm talking about other industries. You were saying that, like, why doesn't the CRA or Metric or somebody else open this data? Well, other industries have this data as well. They don't open it, and they don't open it because you don't give your competitors your data,
oh yeah, no, I'm not expecting them to
right? So that's
like
why
the
they're not
CRA.
doing it. But the fact that, I mean, going around it, you're getting aggregate roundabout data, right? It's not nothing's exact here, which I agree with you with hiding the numbers on the infographic. That makes the most sense. Um, but you can get trends, you can get pricing is exact, which is awesome. That's the one that matters. I think that's your price grabber type of website. That's where you've got a consumer value add. But like the units sold and that's a little rougher data. Because those menus aren't, I mean,
Yeah.
I can, from a programmer standpoint, data guy, I think of it multiple different ways. Like RacerX said, excess inventory in the back that's not on the menu. Loom, every time you hit 5, comes off the online menus. Nothing under 5 is on the online menus. Many of the companies do
So,
that.
a little bit of an interesting point there. A lot of them aren't truly removed from the menu, they're just a bit hidden, and if you know where to look, and so I
Right.
do actually capture that data too, just to be safe. It doesn't show on HiSpy only if the stock is at 0 when it's checked.
Right. So, like the pricing, that's an exact data point. That
Mhm,
one, and that's I think your most usable data point for a consumer, anyways.
mhm.
Um, the other one, it's a little gray, and it's scraping's always a rough industry. Been in that industry a long time. That's a hard one.
Yup.
That you said cat and mouse for Growly. That's not even barely
Oh,
scratching how difficult this
I
can get. And machine learning is usually not involved. This is generally I open the web page, I find something that I can regex to find the data, or I'm running transforms, or
yeah.
there's more advanced ways to do it, but it's still a man. They change one freaking style on the damn website, and
Yeah.
you're bam, you see a flat line.
But
Yeah.
that's why I think we were focused a little bit on the cash flow thing, where it's like if you have someone who's dedicated and you have they can collect a good living chasing after this information, then these 9 different entities have something to fight against at the benefit of the consumer. And I think it's how do we figure out you know, how do we inspire the wagons to circle a little bit and say, actually, no, we need this tool. It needs to stick around in America. It needs to be part of the weed culture. Kind of how Leafly was at the start. Like when this tool popped up, I was reminded of like what Leafly felt like in 2015, 2016 in Colorado, where if I wanted to go find a specific strain, I could search for it and it would tell me relative to the location of my phone which dispensary had it. And that died as soon as commercialization of data happened. But if there's the possibility that that can be recovered in this private effort, that needs to be protected. It's like Jack's Nutrients, right? Like they need to be protected.
Right.
They're doing God's work out here.
Well, I've got to ask. I mean, because that's it's kind of serious the way he speaks about this, right? So, and you, Amy, have brought up several times the regulatory and compliance concerns that you have. I mean, maybe without, showing your hand here, can you kind of explain what those might be?
Yeah. So what I can say, I am not the only person who scrapes dispensary menus at scale. I can think of maybe 5 other companies that are doing that just off the top of my head. This
I
isn't the
would bet
name and
Loom
shame.
does it internally.
Mhm.
That's a guess.
We'll come back to that too. So there's a couple other companies that do this at scale. They have something along the lines of High Spy that they'll show publicly to try and hook businesses, but you can tell it's to try and hook businesses, not really for the consumer.
Consumer, yeah.
And then the other side of it, a lot of these companies internally that are, retailers, for example, or brands in the cannabis space, I've heard, yeah, we have people who spend 12, 15, 20 hours a week. They just go to menus one by one every single day. And you have made that effort obsolete.
That
And
was
so-
me.
And so then to
You're
get
killing
to the,
jobs, Amy. Jeez.
That's how people start with data analysis, though. They do
Yeah,
it the hard
mhm.
way, and then they
Yeah.
realize they can't scale it. So that's where they look for a data broker.
Yep. And so to answer your question about regulatory and compliance, I am only gathering public data. I actually can't, I think, take deals with dispensaries, for example, upload the SKUs you have, upload their stock, all of that other stuff, because that adds a whole nightmare of compliance. The only questions I really truly have that I'm talking with a lawyer about are, can I take this data, give it to businesses in bulk, and they give me money back? That is the only question, because I want to be 100% safe, and I want this to be sustainable without compromising on consumer above all else.
Yeah, you are going to have to balance that, right? And I
Mhm.
think your approach is a well-rounded one to doing that. And again, I applaud it. I mean, you said you kind of been approached before. Has it mostly been dispensaries? Has it been like
No,
growers,
so,
or has the Puffco
it's
type
been
businesses?
I think you would be surprised by the brands and companies that have approached me, because they're not gonna be like a retail storefront. They're not gonna be your, like, small craft grower for the most part. These are the, like, MSOs, 7, 8, 9 figures in revenue. Sorry, not 8, 9, or 10 figures in yearly revenue. We see the value in this. We would like to pay you for this data.
Hmm.
And then, we talk to them, they learn this is your hobby project. And that I've been working on this on my own to try and improve it for consumers. And they have this, holy fuck, we want this to stay the way it is moment. That has probably been the most consistent thing, because they see the value for them, sure. But you read online or you talk to people who are really enthusiasts and connoisseurs, like all of us here. They'll all be like, "Oh, these are shit brands. I would never smoke that." But then you talk to the people behind it, they care truly in their own way about what they're producing. They're just at a different price point in the market. And a lot of them really are doing what they can and trying to push the boundaries of how can we improve the consumer experience. So for an example, there's this company I learned about. It's called, I think, Lucid Green, and their whole shtick is, I as a retailer, I as a brand, I want to put a small tag on my product, and then the consumer can scan it. They get the COAs, they get all this information that they don't have otherwise. And it's just one sticker for the producer. Sorry, that was a bit, but it's so important that we can get this as consumers, and the industry is moving in this direction, I've learned. And it's the brands you would never expect that universally get panned as this is trash. This is I would never smoke. I would go on a tea break before I smoke this. And
Well,
those are
that's-
somehow the ones really pushing it.
That's just, you know, I think that the traditional buying market, or at least the one that's most vocal out there, is a little out of touch in terms of like
Mhm.
how people generally smoke. I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
if you're talking about like certainly we're all connoisseurs and we're all growers and we're all in industry, so we know good weed, and we've been smoking it since it was available at like Cannabis Cup, and it was just an open market of great weed, and it was very hard to find kind of cheaper weed. Now it's all cheap weed. You know who loves that? The general consumer. They
Yep.
love the fact that they can go to the
Yep.
store, spend $15, get a 5-pack of joints. They don't have to roll. They're going to get them very high. Is it going to be a culinary top tier experience? Probably not. You know, we
Do
can
they
talk shit all
care?
day,
Probably not.
but they
You
don't
know,
give a
it's,
shit, dude.
15
they
years ago,
sell-
I didn't give a shit either. I mean,
They sell about as fast as Bud Light.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
You know,
it's
and-
actually, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to say it's really similar to wine. In America, something like 95, 97% of wine, $12 a bottle or less. And cannabis is exactly the same way. People aren't enthusiasts, connoisseurs looking for really tailored specific things. They are, I don't feel great today. I just want to light up and forget about it level of use. And that's not wrong. There's no wrong way to interact with weed. Most people just aren't enthusiasts, and that's okay, I think.
I'm not surprised in the least bit that those are the people that are approaching you about your data, because I certainly wouldn't expect it to be the craft guy. He's probably on your website all day long looking for his own shit, right? That's like popping up over there, and oh, now it's in the UP suite, you know. But the corporate types, MSO types, they have a literal corporate team and a headquarters that are looking at this data and doing the presentations and crunching those numbers to figure out how they can, go into the next
because
market
you
or
move a
expand their-
1% at
Yeah.
that scale means
Mhm.
real fucking
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah,
Yep.
It's
Yeah,
just
those
it's a
decimal
completely
points
different
matter.
game.
Yep.
It's like it's hard to look at it from the perspective of people who have been around since like Grow Show. Like I used to be watching that, and to this now, like there's a craft here, but the business itself, it's Jeeters. It's
Yeah.
trim pre-rolls that have been infused with the least expensive hyper filtered, THCA, because it works and it's reliable, and it's the same whether it's in December or June. That's not to say that what any of us are doing on this hyper culinary end is not valuable, but I think at I talked to all of you about this. It's a good reality check for a lot of growers to go in and go like, what is weed really going for nowadays? The general public,
Yeah.
not just the people who really like it and really appreciate it, but for the vast
and it
majority of
has-
people who are working, can only spend $20 on weed. They
as a
suddenly can
hash
get a half
maker-
ounce.
Yeah, as a hash maker, what percentage of the market are we? And then, how much of the market can you realistically get?
But that's
Like-
useful. You actually have
Yeah.
some really positive stuff from Amy's tool here, of like
Yeah.
you can see exactly how much is hash,
Yeah.
right?
And you could
It-
be more
it's
realistic
beautiful.
about numbers. I mean, we talked about that early when we first started the show, how unrealistic. I think you might have been on that day, how people were just unrealistic.
It's something I
early-
harp on.
Yeah. Everyone was just overhyping how much money they were going to make. Everyone was going to be millionaires, right? And I'm just like, oh no, you guys are looking at shit the wrong way. I backed out just in time.
And that's, I just want to focus here, like for Grawley, you ever gonna smoke? Like, are Jeeters appealing to you?
The concept is, but not the product.
The product
itself.
doesn't exist today. Are you going out and buying a pack?
No.
Superior?
I mean, I'm not.
You just
I do
just a
things
yes or no.
just
Are
to
you gonna
try.
go?
I do it to try it, but
If
it's
someone
not
gave you one, you would smoke it, but like, are you gonna?
Oh, what's
right.
this?
Like,
Hold on. What do I have in here?
Exactly. I mean,
Wait,
like, if you have
wait.
access to better products, you're not gonna do that. I'm not gonna be going
There
out
we
with.
go. I'll just
but
roll
that's
my
just
own.
it. I mean, you've almost got to try the bottom of the barrel and the mid
Mhm.
and the top. You got to know where you're at. And
Sure. Yeah, I'm
but
not
that's
saying I'm
more-
not saying if you would try it, hell
but yeah,
yes.
no, I'm not
I'm
gonna
not
like.
saying if you would try it. I'm just saying if you would buy it as a consumer, and the answer is
Man.
no. I know it's no. I
Yeah.
know it's no for you. I know it's no for Jason. Amy, I'm pretty sure it's no for you. But like the concept of knowing exactly where you stand in context with those things is important. Because at the end of the day, I'm on metrics. So if we're selling to realistically maybe 2,000 to 4,000 people who are approved to buy the product that we create in Michigan. And all of those people have to buy Jeters at a certain quantity, at a certain price to make that margin on their store. Because they're not growers, they run a dispensary. It's a different thing. So they're looking at me with, nicer weed, and it's just a different conversation, but it's in context of that. So
Right.
even if you're in this fine market, you really ought to just pop on High Spy, take a look at your local neighborhood, and see how much weed is going for at these corporate stores. Because we can be as high and mighty as we want, but the vast majority of people who are buying weed who are not growers and part of the industry, they have since gone to the dispensary. The people who want good weed and still want it are still seeking it out in private market, and that's a beautiful thing. That's a uniquely American, awesome thing. But the problem is you have such a low bar in this. You have to understand what you're up against, right? And how low people are willing to accept for their weekly high, right?
Yeah, the masses.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Bud Light, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
It sucks, but it's worth knowing exactly how much it sucks. So
Right.
whether you know exactly how much to plant next.
It's hard to look at our multi-billion-dollar industry and realize how much of that is actually pre-rolls, and
Amy can tell you exactly how much.
Yeah.
Oh, it's enormous.
But going
It's
to the
3 billion this year.
dispensary and the number of like 60 and 70-year-olds I've met buying gummies, that like if you would have told me 20 years ago I'd be watching 70-year-olds buy weed gummies, I would have shit.
They all love it, dude. Little snack before bed. They all
Of
love it.
course.
Replace that nightly glass of wine, or add to it.
It really does seem to be about convenience in the end. No one wants to go sit in a church parking lot, wait an hour for their guy to show up. They could just pop by the weed store, be in and out 15 minutes, and that's it. Is it going to be the same quality? No. And I do think that that's a loss. But fundamentally, it can't be at the scale that a lot of these growers are at, because when
Mhm.
you're that big, you fundamentally can't put the love and care into each plant, right?
Mhm.
Where's the the plant count limit for that, Racer? That you can't put love and care anymore.
I don't know. That's tough. I would say that you'd have to stay south of 100 lights if you're gonna provide the same level of care. Like, you could theoretically do it.
So one class C, basically.
Yeah, maybe that's stretching it. But
Depends on how
inevitably,
many
you're going
hours
to take a
they
look at your
wanna work.
overhead and you're going to go, let's hit these with 4 OEC. Let's get this yield up. I saw you highlight that comment
Yeah.
earlier from Smokey, and I think it's worth mentioning that, like, Amy, you've got some deep
Mhm.
fans here.
Yeah,
If you live in Ann Arbor, High Spy is a lifesaver. If I'm looking for Durban poison, I can find it. In fact, I've been able to. It's the same experience as like I was
Yep.
talking about Leafly in Colorado, man. And then, yeah, I just, it's worth pointing out that it's going to keep growing, and I'm super excited to see it. What's next for
So
High Spy?
interesting. Well, there's an interesting point I saw in the chat just now that I wanted to cover. Someone commented, brands like Wojo are helping to push consumer tastes. I don't think it's just the quality of their product. If you look on socials, Instagram, Reddit, they are active. They are engaging with their users. They know where the enthusiasts are. And that's really, I think, what helped them, because it's not just they're
No.
producing decent product. They are engaging with their users where they're at. They're actively addressing concerns. And that's not something I see a lot of in this business. And that's huge, because it's not just I'm producing a product. It's I actively listen to my customers. I actively try to interact with them. How much do we see that? We don't.
Right.
Vendor days at Dispose. That's probably it.
That's not really enough. That's a tiny subset of a subset of a subset of your market.
Yeah.
That's not really
Wojo
for a
just
brand.
won Cannabis
sorry.
Cup this last
Mhm.
week here in Michigan, and dug into some of their processes, and it was interesting. I didn't realize they're running iceless washes.
Mhm.
They're running full RODI, just so it's 0 ppm water and iceless. They don't go. They ice machines are dirty. I love their
Big
quote
old
on it.
chiller, I would assume. I'm not big in the.
Yeah. So it's the same. Like we were talking back and forth because it's the same setup I built. Glycol chilled vessel, all your water's chilled, no ice, and just 0 ppm water. It's just right from as clean as you can be. Everything's on my plant. That's the only place of my
Good.
source of contaminants.
So how are they communicating that, Amy, to their consumers? Like beyond just like being on menu at a certain price, what else are they doing?
Yeah, so the main thing I see every time on the Michigan subreddit that Wojo is mentioned, they are there. They have a brand representative interacting with them. If someone's complaining, it's not you're doing it wrong, it's we're sorry, what can we do to make this better for you? Because it's not then just about are they producing a good product, it's do they make me feel like I'm appreciated for using it? And
Right. They've done a
I'm
good job
sorry.
with it. Their head hasn't gotten big with
Mhm.
as many awards and all of
Yeah.
the pod. You listen to them talk on the Only Grows podcast there, and it's just it's a great group of guys.
Mhm.
It sounds just like if any of us were hitting at that level.
Yeah. And they are I've learned they're aware I exist. I've had a bit of interaction with them on Reddit. Hey, we know the tool, we use it, we love it. And even that just helps me realize they are actively looking at and engaging with their community. Not even they don't have to be responding to everything, but they're even just we're here. We are paying attention to what our users are saying. And I so wish more brands did that. It's so important. Because if you're
Yeah.
generic processor number 3, you're pumping out product. You don't know how the market really feels. They, to me, understand who their consumer is and where their consumer is. And that seems to have bought them a lot of favor in the market, on top of also producing good product.
Yeah, they're definitely active on the socials, and the beautiful pictures don't hurt.
Mhm.
They have some gorgeous shots sometimes.
Yep.
But they're
Sounds
definitely
like
doing it right. It's rougher for a lot of the small guys. You
Mhm.
see it and it hurts because you have a great processor, someone producing fire product, and they're just rough. And it's like, oh God, I wish you could afford a PR person, like, or someone who could,
Yup.
because you could do so much better if it's just, honey, right? You
Mhm.
just attract more.
Yup. It's I know I keep harping on this, but I don't think it's so much even about quality. It's how you present yourself.
Mhm.
Wojo's on the expensive end and they're better quality for sure. But a cheaper brand could nail presentation and probably do pretty well.
Yeah. It's something to be said about the cannabis community, right? Like
Yep.
we're a special breed where we don't want the bullshit. We just want good medicine. We want everyone to have good vibes, everyone to be happy and make money. Like if you can match the vibe of the community is going to accept you basically.
Mhm.
Those
Yeah,
are incredible prices that I'm seeing as you're scrolling by. I mean, that's very
I know.
similar to Eastside Alchemy and what they're charging. One thing
Yep.
I did want to ask you, Amy, are you seeing some general price increases over like just as a whole, or are you seeing general steady downward as we've been seeing for the last year in terms of retail price? Are you
That's
able
a
to
good
like
question. I
parse
can
that?
check that. It's just not a stat I've been following right now. But knowing that people are interested in it, absolutely, that's something I can start tracking
Oh,
because
you should have that as a traffic light on the phone page. It's like How's it doing? Because there's a lot of
For
people who
Broly, you're
care.
muted.
Here's what I'd say. I would take the CRA report that they put out every month, recreate it with your own data, and then publish that every month, because that should be easy once you create it the first time. And I
CRA
think
report revised.
yeah, and I think we'll just start sharing that on our shows instead of the CRA report.
So I have
The average
actually looked at
THC in
that.
Michigan is somehow 110%. Jesus Christ.
So I have actually compared my numbers to the CRA's report. And part of the problem I've run into, I don't understand the CRA's categorization. It seems like they're missing some categories of product.
Yes.
They stuff
Thank you,
things
thank
together
you.
in just the weirdest ways.
Yes,
We
it's
I don't
talked
get
about
it.
this a
vague.
couple weeks back. I actually took the full year's CRA reports and fed it
Mhm.
into a notebook LLM and then
Mhm.
asked, okay, what's going on? And it could not give me graphs and trends because
Yeah.
the data was so mismatched. And it told me, it's like there's
Yeah.
holes in the data.
Mhm.
It's just flat out.
Yep.
Well, shit. Somebody doesn't know how to report.
Yeah.
Or,
Or
you
they
know,
just
what
keep
happened more
changing.
likely is they replaced somebody with somebody
Yes.
else, and then they
Yeah.
just started building their own report, and then
Or the
someone else.
director decided to change something. You know, it's like, who knows? It's
Yeah.
it's probably more of a personnel thing than a.
It's it's probably not an automated report that they poop out every month.
So
But
so
I
a
bet
bit of
you
an
Amy can help
interesting
them with
point.
that.
I
A bit of
bet
an
they
interesting
will
point
not
from
get that.
that is, you know, we were just talking like the CRA report, all sorts of things are weird, miscategorized. This is a problem for the businesses too.
Mhm.
Their data brokers, I swear to God, it's designed by people who have never used cannabis in their life. You don't get edible subcategory gummy. You get ingestible subcategory gummy, subcategory beverage. Anything that goes in your mouth that's not inhaled can get all grouped together. It's insane. Why? Who thought this up?
They hired
And-
some BI guy, and he just went in there and built a data warehouse, and
Mm-hmm.
they were like, slice the data, and he
Yeah.
just picked his random fucking groupings.
Yeah.
What's a banana cost? $10?
It's
Yeah.
it's crazy when you get data people that don't know their industry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to make a comment about.
Do it. You don't have a license yet? Do it.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. How many people are working in this industry that are not data people, but we'll call them more academic type people that are put in charge of actually being hands-on with processes, and they have no background in anything but their PhD, which I don't know why that's necessary, but I mean, it's certainly helpful, but maybe not when you're making decisions hands-on in a lab. Why don't you go back to your office where you probably should be with a PhD? That one confused me. I don't know. I probably just confused you all too. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Happens in a lot of businesses.
Yeah, I know.
So this actually kind of reminded me of a bit of a tangential point. When you think about weed, you think, I'm going to smoke it. Maybe I'm going to eat it, right? But there's all these other interesting forms of consumption that really I don't feel get enough attention. You know, we have the things like the lotions, we have transdermal patches, we have sublinguals with tinctures. People invented freaking suppositories, you know? And it's important because to me, cannabis is not about getting high. It is about helping people. And these lesser known products that are less intoxicating or non intoxicating, rec pushes them out, it feels like, because people are just like, oh, I can get baked legally. Who cares? But then as a medical user, I care about those products deeply because I need them to alleviate the symptoms I have day to day. How, without the tool I built really for myself, how could I find them? You know, I got down the path
Cold
of,
calling dispos all day.
right. You know, I got down the path of actually making my own because how else could I get it? It shouldn't be this way. And if I have this struggle and I'm wanting it, how many people like me are out there who don't have the know-how or ability to do it themselves?
A lot.
It's infuriating.
Now, I feel like we, just for a moment, speaking of tangents, can back up for a second. And one of the questions we often ask our guests is, to tell us about the first time you smoked weed. Because you
Ooh,
said
so this
something
is a
about
good
you were
one.
a medical user for a couple of
Yep.
years now. But do you remember? Can you recall? And do you want to share the first
Yes.
time you ever smoked?
So I was never a recreational user. The first time I used cannabis, I was 23, and I had been diagnosed with PTSD a couple of months earlier. And the person I was dating at the time, she was a cannabis user, and she was like, "Hey, cannabis does a lot for PTSD. Maybe you should give it a try." You know, we were in Ohio at the time. It was medical only. She had a med card. Went to the dispensary, got a pack of 10 milligram edibles. We cut one in half, saw what happened. Incredibly intense for my first time with cannabis. On the outside, I'm sure it looked like I was having a panic attack, right? But on the inside, that was the first true moment of peace I had ever experienced. It hit me. Life doesn't have to be miserable. You know, I can have relief from these symptoms I didn't even realize I had because I lived with them for so long.
Mhm.
Cannabis changed my life because it hit me. I don't have to suffer for existing, basically. And, you know, I go from that, I really get into it where it's medical only in Ohio, and I actually kind of loved it because a number of brands would print the minor cannabinoids, the major terpenes on their packaging directly. And as a medical user, that is so unbelievably interesting because I can go to the dispensary, I can spend an hour and a half talking to the bud tender. We go through all the products, we go through their labels. I know I'm coming away something that will most likely help me. And then I moved to Michigan, and suddenly it's, bro, trust me, bro, this will get you really stoned. Believe me, you know, this is the flavor you'll like. I don't care about that so much as a med user. I care, does this have the effects that I need? And that's paramount because there's not enough information. You go to the dispensary and you see this big display. Here's the cannabinoids. Here's what they do. But then I go back, I talk to the bud tender, like, all right, what flavor do you want? And I die a little more on the inside every time.
Well, all right. So I got one minor rant. I'll keep it short. There's a new rule set with the CRA that's requiring terpene testing on batches, which is great for the consumer. I'm glad that they're getting it. But when you go to the dispensary and you ask for that terpene test, they don't fucking give it to you. They're not required to. And you're not required to, like, maybe you are in the
Label
future
it.
now that you have to produce like something on the label, but you don't have to list minor cannabinoids. You're probably going to only have to list a terpene percentage, which is going to be useless. And all of this data that we pay hundreds of dollars per batch that we have to put out that negates the small batch market. None of this data is available to the end consumer. The state is getting it, and they're requiring it for safety and compliance reasons. And it's available to the dispensaries. The dispensaries could, if they desire to, publish the information that's in their metric, but they're not doing it. Most of them are not doing it. By most, I mean like 98% and above. I've only been to one dispensary that'll actually like show you, shout out Arborside. If you ask them, they'll show you exactly what shows up on the metric package. As a consumer, didn't mention that I was a license holder, didn't mention anything about it. They will show you. That's awesome. But all of this data collection, all of the PhDs that are working at these independent labs, of which there are what, 10 and 20 across the state that are still in business doing work. None of this data that we have to pay for actually ends up in the end consumer's hands. That is ridiculous. It's a shame, and it's a waste of everybody's time and money. If it's
you just
not available.
described a perfect subset of the business model: ingesting data.
Mm-hmm.
You know, take it from the people, let them hand you the data, take in the data, and now you have extra data that other, you know,
That's what I'm saying about them opening their books.
Mhm.
You know, if it's not accurate, well then,
really-
you know, let's update it.
I really want that. It's just a regulatory nightmare. You know, I have to go business
Yeah.
by business, fight with metric, fight with the agencies in every state. You know,
It would be
it's like it's set up
interesting.
to screw the consumer.
It would be interesting if you could go at it at the lab level instead. It would be really cool but labs have so many other restrictions. I'm just
Mhm.
walking it through in my head, just trying to figure out a good pathway.
I've got a
Oh, it's a
prediction on this
struggle.
actually, and this is something that I'm selfishly like the reason why I'm introducing and trying to like amplify this project of yours, Amy, is like you're leveling the playing field so much that it is going to force consumers to end up looking for quality. Like if you can't hide behind certain elements of data and like obfuscation of these sort of things, then people are going to become wise to what's good and what's not very quickly. So the more that people figure out that this tool works, the bigger it becomes, and the greater the capabilities. And if you're able to actually do like batch level tracking and provide terpene and testing data for each of these items, there, like it's going to become indispensable to the consumer. And the more you push, the more it grows. I think it's kind of an inevitable thing, especially with all the data that has to be produced for it. I think you're going to force the hand of producers to the point where they are going to want to voluntarily submit the data, right?
Yep.
Like,
some do. It's just a question of compliance.
really,
Yep.
in terms of like you being able to publish it front facing.
Yes, there are producers who have told me outright, we are okay with this. We didn't know the consumer wants this, but we are okay with it. It's just a regulatory nightmare.
There's no consumer identifying information in the batch numbers.
So my
what's
understanding
the holdup
is because it's metric data in some form or another, there are so many regulations and the like around metric and getting data from it. I was told it would probably, I want to give this to you, it would probably be borderline illegal, if not actually illegal, for me to give this to you. We know consumers want this now that you've told us, but we can't because you aren't partnered with Metric. You haven't gone state by state. We don't want to get screwed over because we're trying to help the consumer.
So to let that sink in, because it's sinking in for me right now, the data that we're paying these state licensed labs for is not going to a repository that's owned by the state. It's owned by Franwell.
So there are some efforts I've learned of to try and get this data back out to consumers, but it's still a brand has to opt into it. And just why?
From what I understand, like for what you're telling me, the fear is that because it's Metric's data, you're not partnered with Metric. It's because like if it's court data or if it's information that we have to provide to the state for like who's in a business, that's publicly available information that anybody can go and look up. But the problem is that we're like, at least from a licensed production perspective, we're under the guise that like we're providing the safety and compliance data to the public so that they can decide or whether the state's going to permit the sale of certain batches. Like, and the reason why we have to test for THC is the same reason why alcohol producers have to publish what their proof is, right? Because they're taxed at different rates. And for us, like whether it's concentrate or flower determines how much we're allowed to sell to the consumer at the end of the day. So there's like different things there. But the information on testing, we're thinking that's going to a public database. I think something that's not known here, not widely accepted amongst growers, even the licensed side, is that's not public information. That's owned by Franwell. And the issue with making that information public would be because you're publishing private information owned by a private company. And not like mugshots.com.
Are they claiming that they own that information? I pulled up their terms of service.
No. So
that's what I was wondering.
What I've been told is you as a producer, you give this data to Metric as a part of state compliance. The state has access to all of it, of course. You as the producer have access to it. I think the retailers do get access. I'm not sure. But I as a consumer can't go see it. And I as an outsider to the industry, since Metric is basically the state compliance, I can't just say, hey, Metric, give me this data, because I have to comply state by state to even see it, much less try to republish it. And there's a whole separate agreement that I'd have to negotiate then with Metric for every single market, as I understand it, can I republish this data? It's a nightmare, and
Interesting.
I don't understand why.
Yeah, I mean, like if the state is compelling the private businesses to submit testing for public safety concerns, logically to me, that means the data that we're like, going through and collecting ought to be available to the public, but it's not. And for, whether the legal reason is because you don't have API access because you haven't paid them $50,000 a year or whatever, or that's kind of silly because, they're double dipping.
Absolutely, but
are-
that's what they're
There
designed
are
to do.
companies trying
Yeah.
to get this information out of them. It takes time, and no one's done it before.
That's just it's silly how it's set up, but I doubt that the people who made the law kind of comprehended what was going on as they were deciding it. That's the unfortunate realization that I've had over the last couple of years. Is that's the nature of some of the laws that we're operating under.
A lot of them.
There is
Most
this
of them.
company that I just sent in the private stream chat. If you want to pull it up, these people are actually trying to accomplish this goal. Get this data out of metrics so we can then display it to the consumer, where they just scan a tag. And that is probably the most interesting approach to this that I've seen.
That's amazing. I'm scrolling through as well.
Yep. And so if you scroll down to the section for consumers specifically, that's really where they get to this.
Always
They
on
have this
platform.
whole
Yeah,
thing that they're trying to do, but the main thing of interest to me is they provide access to the COAs,
that's incredible.
and
Yeah,
that's
that's
I think the
exactly.
real selling point. And then the brands like it because they can use it for things like rewards programs, analytics,
Mhm.
and then the retailers like it for similar reasons. And so, sort of, kind of, everyone wins. And is it the best way? No, but we take what we get.
Well, ideally consumers end up using the tool that works the best, but not necessarily the one that's most marketed. And I think that's kind of why Leafly lost out to some of the other publishers down the line. But yeah, I'll have to take a look and see if there's a couple of brands. Do you know any brands in Michigan that are using that service?
Surprisingly, the one that set me onto it is, I think, I don't know how I would quantify their position in the market, like top shelf, bottom shelf, whatever. Cali Blaze, the pre-roll brand. They're the people who put me onto
Really?
this. Yup. I talked to them. They genuinely seem to give a fuck about what they're putting into their products. They are just also at a lower price point in the market, as I understand it, than what you would consider as like a high quality or connoisseur brand.
That's
But
fascinating.
that's not they don't care. That's they understand their position in the market.
Okay, that's awesome.
It's you would never expect it from a lot of these brands because you look at their price point and you think, oh, it's trash. But that's not true. A lot of them do care so much more than people think.
So you'd mentioned a couple of different ways that you're consuming. Do you still smoke pre-rolls, or what's your ratio look like?
I can't do combustion at all. My lungs are just too sensitive. I did do dabs for a long time. I've been on a pretty extended break. I think I'm 383 days sober today, give or take.
Congrats.
And it's because I was at the point, I was dabbing through 2 grams a day just to feel normal, not even to get high. And that's not healthy. And so I'm forcing myself to take this long break to reframe how I interact with it. I don't want to be at
that's
that
entirely
point.
fair. I don't mean to make light of cannabis overconsumption is a big issue in this space, but yeah, I mean, you're targeted for early superior buds and
Oh yeah, but you can be an enthusiast and consume in the way that works for you.
100%, yeah.
And it's not just, oh, I smoke hash rosin all the time, I'm superior to you, like you see on Reddit or whatever. It's I consume in the way that works for me, and that's the most important thing.
Yep, the egos have gotten pretty crazy. Yep. We've been talking about that a lot, and it's it's always been meant to solve your problems in your way. It doesn't matter how you grow it, how you consume it, whatever, just as long as you're able to take advantage.
Yep.
Some
You
people
know,
want to grow it, some people want to buy it.
Yep. If
Some
it works
people
for
want the
you, that's the most
$10.
important thing.
Exactly. Yep.
You know,
Like
like
you
I
said.
grow my own. I have plants in the basement. I still go to the dispensary
Mhm.
because sometimes you just need what you need.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's Amy, you and I talked about that a little bit, how there's a bit of a division in the industry right now because it is like people have forgotten, but we're over half a decade into legalization and into the mature commercial market of cannabis. And that means you have people who have had storied careers, but not in the black market. They've never worked, like they've had a paycheck their entire time. And that's kind of like, that's not a relatable position for a lot of people who have operated prior to legalization. But meanwhile, we're all growing the same weed here. Not
Yep.
that's, you know what I mean? We all have the same job at the end of the day. And
Yep.
we're all dealing with the same end consumer need. And but you have certain good things coming from this new market of people who are like, no, this is a serious business, no different than any other job, and this is my career, and they think about it that way, as opposed to people who are like, I'm in it for 5 years, I'm going to make my money and bounce, or I'm going to keep this private, it's going to be something completely at home. You know, the resolve between the old and the new, where they mesh, you end up finding some really cool things, like caregivers who make it through to the metric market, strains that bounce back and forth between the two areas. Like, it's cool, but there's definitely some friction. Like there's new heads don't necessarily understand the anxiety of a door knock in certain areas, right? Like, but you know, the fact that it's going commercial and the fact that it's to the point where people don't even know the days of when people were getting arrested in mass, it's a generally good thing. So for all the back in my day bullshit, we're in a better place right now. And this tool is indication of that.
I'm so glad you brought this tangent that I started like 15 minutes ago, brought it back to where I wanted it to go, actually, because I asked about, the first time you smoked, and you told us it was half a 10 milligram edible. And I think you're actually the first person on the show to share their first time they smoked story, and it wasn't smoking. And I often always ask, oh, let me guess, like, was it your friend's older brother? You know what I mean? Because it's a lot of times it's your friend's older brother that hooks you up with the weed or whatever for your first time, and smoking out behind the garage or whatever it might be, right? That's a little bit different of an experience. I don't know how long ago 23 was for you, but you did mention you have been a medical user for 2 years.
Little
And
more than 2 years, closer to 3 or 4.
okay.
But
And
not long at all.
and one of the things you brought up was like topicals and how that's not widely really like accepted or maybe even known of at especially the recreational level. And as you were talking about that, both Racer and I held up our jars of topicals that I'm sure we use daily, and now we're talking about this crossover, and it's all that to say it's very interesting to see how someone that maybe is a little bit more newer to the industry, if you will, which 4 years is not a short amount of time, especially in this young industry, but it's funny to see, or not funny, but it's interesting to see how you're approaching issues and tackling problems, because if I didn't have access to it, what did I do? Well, I started growing it, and then I started making the topical, right? And like, I know that not everyone has the opportunity and the ability to do that, and that's why your product is so successful and so needed. But I just appreciate that it's getting tackled from a different way. You know what I mean? Because you're furthering that access that has been so furthered in the last decade, but it clearly needs to be refined. And it's just, again, props.
It's not even just access, it's consumer education. You say
that's what we've been
weed,
talking. That's why we have a
people think-
podcast, Amy.
right? No, but like you say weed. I have friends who don't smoke, they don't consume at all. You say weed, they think disgusting skunk smell. I don't want to be around that. You show them better products, and suddenly they understand, even without using, oh, weed doesn't have to be disgusting. What other misconceptions do I have? And so the preconception of, oh, weed, you have a pre-roll or something you rolled yourself that you're lighting up, you're smoking out of a bong. It's not that way for everyone. But that perception of it that's so popular makes it harder in some ways for more novel forms to come up, I feel like.
I think the regulations have a lot to do with that too, in terms of the novel
Mhm.
forms. But and that's why I think you
Oh,
do see a
yeah.
lot of that, or maybe a little bit more of that, on the kind of legacy market side of things.
Mhm.
I think that's a natural process. But
Yep.
I mean, so topicals. I think I've been screaming that from the rooftops for the 7 years or whatever I've been making these. Also terpenes, and you brought that up already. How valuable that is to anyone, but especially medical users. And I think that's an important part of the recipe that's missing, and I can't believe it hasn't been regulated into existence. I think Alaska, speaking of which, is actually one of the few states that does require terpene labeling on their packaging. So there might be that extra set of data there for you once you dive into that great icy giant northern state up there. Bust into that market. But I'd like to see that. I've said this 100 times probably on this show alone, but I hate seeing more regulation. But it's like, why is that not one of them? Why are we not requiring terpene?
Yeah, we talked about
testing
common
labeling?
sense regulation, and
Yeah.
that feels like it should be one.
But it's not people that are with a background or the experience in it that are writing these laws, or lobbying for the laws, or maybe they are on the lobbying
Someone
side.
told
that's
them
why they're-
THC percentage, and
It's
Well, that's
mostly
what sells.
the testing guys that are writing the laws, as far as I can tell.
You're saying the testing guys are anti-labeling terpenes?
No, they are very much for charging an extra $120 per batch of terpenes.
100%. That's
yeah.
they don't
I'm
care
not
if you
involved
show
in
it,
any
they just want you
labs.
to take the test.
Yep. This actually kind of gets me a little bit of a tangent from here. I think we actually do ourselves a disservice for medical use by focusing on flavor. That's not to say smell and taste isn't important, but we have this miraculous plant. It produces hundreds or thousands of chemicals, and we focus on what does it smell like, which is important, but I, as a medical consumer, I can't speak for anyone else. I care first and foremost the effects. And I keep finding the more I look in the metric market, at least, there's this dazzling array of strain names of products. And somehow there's all these different smells, and they all just, they feel like they do the same thing. How am I really supposed to understand the variety that weed has when everything feels so samey? It's one of the reasons I'm glad the craft and the caregiver markets exist, because those are the people who are going to explore those weirder strains, those weirder plants that can't be viable so much commercially.
But aren't terpenes and effects essentially tied together?
They are some, don't get me wrong, but my subjective experience. So like whenever I try something new, I go deep because I'm an enthusiast. I'll like look up the lineage of it and things like that. And consistently, for my use personally, I've noticed that every time a genetic lineage is deep down that tree of like cookies, cake, gelato, GMO, runts, Z, the same handful of things you see over and over, to me personally, my subjective interpretation, they all just feel muddled and unclear as to what the effects are actually supposed to be. And I noticed that the more I use them, the more they all just blur together. And I can't really point out noteworthy strains that I've had for a very long time because they all feel so similar to me anymore. And maybe that's just me, but
no, it's not just you. Those are two different things, though. There's from a cannabis perspective, you've got smokable flower and generalized concentrates as a delivery method or like a honestly, it's like a culinary preparation of the plant. And then if you're talking about what the specific effects are of each individual terpene and each isolate of every cannabinoid, that's a different side of the industry dealing with heavy processing. Like, you're better served on, like, if you're seeking out finding what specific thing is causing which specific effect or helping in a specific way. Isolates or fraction distillation provides you specifically what you're looking for, but that is divorced from what, let's say, a lot of the craft hash makers and growers are focused on. Because in a certain sense, some of us are data driven and go after testing and breed for specific things, but a lot of it's by the nose and by the eye and by intuition, because it's more of an art and less of a science in the garden. But it all boils down to science at the end of the day. With testing and processing. It's just, there's a market for culinary, and I think that's kind of what I choose to represent and what we chase after in the garden, or culinary effects. But what's going on with the research side, being able to say CBN, CBG does this and this, that's amazing. And having the data for consumers who are focused on that is great, but it's not representative of the entire market. We're both weed nerds, just in two different ways, right? Like, some people are searching for flavors and lineage, and they're the food scientists are finding out, why is that cool? Why do people like it? Why are people's intuition are finding on it? So I don't think that you're wrong. I just think that there are people who exist on either side of the spectrum who are both valid.
We ask this question a lot, and that's one of the things Spartan Grown and I differ on, and is he will shout from the rooftops, effects are number one to him. I don't feel the same way about that, because if I don't like the taste of it, I don't really care what the effects are. You know what I mean? So to me, I put taste at the top. But we also approach it often from a grower's perspective, because some plants are easier to trim, so maybe we want to grow those a little bit more. Maybe it finishes a week or 2 weeks quicker than the other ones, right? So, but for you as a consumer, maybe we could just look at the website to tell us what's important to you. But why don't you give us this list of what's important to you?
So I would say it's effects, then smell and taste. No, effect, quality, and smell and taste kind of occupy that number 2 slot. And then it's things like accessibility, specific form, things like that, in no particular order. And so the reason I go in that order, I found some plants that other people have grown. They produce products. I can get some great effects out of it. But for example, personally, I don't like the taste of GMO. It's popular. I can't do it. It could be the best plant on the planet, have great effects, but it still has to be palatable, right?
It's not for everybody.
But then the other side of it is something that I've learned. Every time I go to the dispensary now, I ask, can I smell the product? Because by smelling it, not only do I know, am I likely to like or hate the taste of this, but I can also get an idea of the effect profile.
Yeah, the nose knows.
Yep. And
I agree there 100%.
It's critically important to me personally as a user, because quite frankly, I'm trash at growing. I'm like 2-3 years into it. I still regularly fuck it up. I will not be producing stellar plants for a good long time here. And so being able to find that stuff that'll do what I want still, you got to just learn and do it, one way or the other.
It's the beauty of this plant is there's so many varieties. There's so many different ways,
There's so many what?
Like different terpene profiles.
Different.
Yeah.
Say the word.
Strains. Variables.
Let me just set this up for you a little bit higher.
There's a layup on in the back of the head.
Make it iridescent.
I'm coming over here like Charlie Brown. Just I was kind of hoping our guests would say it eventually, but
it is really what makes it interesting. There's no wrong way to consume. The best way to consume is what you personally like. The best plants are what you like. And that's what makes it such a beautiful plant. There's so many ways to do it and no way is wrong.
Yep. even as that's from the consumer standpoint, because it's going to affect everyone differently. But also, we talk about it from a grower standpoint too. It's like everyone has their own growing philosophy. I'm not going to say there's no wrong way to do it, because there's certainly wrong ways to do it.
There's
but you know what I
definitely
mean.
wrong ways, but there's a lot of right ways too.
Yeah, there's more than one right way. That's for sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, and more than I can count probably. So, it's completely okay to do it however it works for you.
Yep, exactly.
Do you have
You know,
any
it's-
deeper plans for strain lineage announcing on HiSpy?
Oh, yeah. So it already
Like-
will, in that expanded information section, it tries pretty hard to extract strain name from product name. And it'll give you links to Leafly, Allbud, and Google. So you can try and dig deeper. Strain Finder just did a redesign, so I think I might be able to add them too.
Yes.
Because for the enthusiasts, you should be able to find this. Because you want to know one way or another, do I care about it? Is it something I'm interested in? And, Leafly, Allbud, all of these things, they're not necessarily going to have what you're looking for. So what else do you use? You use Google like everyone else does.
And I don't know,
Okay, what do you do?
for early spirit, do you guys feel Seed Finder is probably the standard right now?
For like the lineage stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you
yeah,
feel like
for
it's
sure.
the Pokedex?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I mean, Leafly like tries, right? Like, but there's
They do
nothing
their
like,
best.
there's nothing like Seed Finder. They go real deep, and it's I don't know how long it's been around, but I feel like it's
the
probably
age of the data is what I think their
Yeah.
biggest strength is.
yeah. You got a decade
There's-
on someone else.
There's a lot of shit you hit in Leafly that you're just like, I know that's not right. Like, I was there. Wait a minute.
And then we're in like this post first smoke of the day era where like lineage things that have been on there are now getting countered, and it's like, oh god, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, what are we doing, folks? Oh, I hate that I became the old guy.
What was it? The Phylos project or whatever?
Oh, the Galaxy.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
know.
wasn't there
the whole
some
story behind
scandal
that,
with them?
but- Yeah.
I might be collaborating with them at some point. I'll just leave that out in the air somewhere. I have some DMs going with
But
some
from a
people who
data
may own
nerd
the Instagram
standpoint-
account associated with that fiasco.
From a data nerd standpoint, man, that's like a fucking gold mine.
Right.
They didn't collect shit. They didn't get anything. You think they had the capabilities to sequence all of that? I bet they collected a fair amount of biomass and then didn't do anything with
Well,
it.
did you see the Galaxy? Did you ever the
No.
Galaxy alone? Oh, the Galaxy was awesome.
Was it?
Oh,
All right,
so
maybe I'm wrong.
cool.
All interconnected. It was a full. I mean, you could go from cultivar down the chain and go from all siblings, and their data was really well organized.
Mhm.
But
UI.
you brought up at some point there was one. It was a haze that had like 3 different regional interpretations of a specific strain, where like there were 3 different dominant lineages that were all named the same. Was it Super Silver Haze, or what was that you brought? It must have been years ago.
Yeah,
But like, how accurate can that data be from?
but that's what was cool about their data is it was
It pointed it out.
extremely accurate. Yeah,
Okay.
It was okay. Here's what it was reported as. Here's what our sequence says it was. And we have 10 other things that match this sequence that are named 10 different things.
Gotcha.
So and you would also find the same name across 10 different sequences. Like those aren't the same fucking plants. So it was really, and they could even
Who
tell you-
mislabeled the clones?
yeah, they can even tell you they're not even genetically similar. Like there's no way they're even from the same lineage. So it's not like they were,
That's nuts.
number 1 and number 2, and then they made it through a couple crosses. It like their data had a lot of value to it.
I wonder how long it actually does take to do that sequencing work accurately enough to produce what they did. You know what I mean?
It's not long anymore.
No?
So-
Especially, well, and you don't just run one sample at a time anymore.
Right.
When you're
I
doing
wonder if
something
part
like-
of the problem that they had is I don't know how they operated. It's a little bit before my time. I wonder if they had the problem of strain name is pretty meaningless these days, it feels like, at least with metric. So you'll have people being like, "Oh, this is totally super silver haze, trust me." And it might be something completely different that was just labeled wrong or called the
Metric,
wrong
yes.
thing.
And that's
Caregiver
what their
market, no.
sequence was showing. That
Mhm.
it would actually, you would go to one of the sequences and it would show you all the people that submitted, and here's the 10. You know, the scandal from them came up was everyone was afraid that they were copywriting their genetics and they were going to use the genetics to via tissue culture to reproduce their plants and sell their like it was just
Oh, Lord.
yeah. So people thought they were going to own all the cannabis genetics or some shit like that.
Yeah, the IP scare was very
Yeah,
real.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, maybe it wasn't actually real, but it
wasn't really
scare- the
real, but it
scariness
scared
was.
people enough.
Yeah. Yeah, because
Basically.
you know, it was the whole thing with like Bayer, Monsanto, and Scott's, right? And then Scott's starting to buy up you know, some of the cannabis industry, I guess. And yeah, was it Hawthorne? And then it's like, all right, well, now the same people that control these genetically modified plants that everyone's required to grow to, you know, feed the world or whatever, they're now going to be controlling our the nutrients and supplies for our cannabis plants. Like shit, you know.
Look,
I think that
all I
spawned a
gotta
lot of
say-
different movements, actually.
All I gotta say is thank God they lost so much money on that Lux deal. Shout out Jungle Boys. You're a real one.
Speaking of lights, did you see the news with Samsung?
What they got new?
Samsung exiting the LED market.
Really?
Really?
Horticulture is the first to go. LG will be making their screens for within
Huh.
2025.
What? Someone call HLG. What's going on here?
It was on they MJ BizCon and quite a bit of talk.
That's
last-
fascinating.
Jeez.
So they're dropping out.
But they will be out of horticulture, I think, next year.
Do you think they're replacing it with like they're out of the LED business, but we're in the future super secret laser emitting diode business that you don't know about yet, or something like that? Or do you think
It
they're
seems
just like
very
lighting
interesting to
stuff
cut
we're
that
out?
size of the business, right?
Yeah.
They weren't losing that bad. I mean,
To who?
can't imagine.
Lucia?
China's LED market has tripled over the past 8 years. They struggle to maintain profitability on its LED business in the face of lower cost Chinese products.
so they're gonna buy from LG for their screens, for TVs and such. Even
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
kind of wild.
That is nuts. That's a ground shift. That's a huge shift.
But yeah, like you
Um,
said, at first when I thought of was shit, HLG. Like that's where I get all
Yeah.
my shit. Come on, guys.
Actually, what-
You.
Sorry.
I've got a question for Amy, and it's
Mhm.
another one that we ask all of our guests. And I know you're not a hash maker, but you know, and maybe you haven't dabbed lately, but you do got a puff go as much as Racer X has been screaming at you, and you have used it. And one of the things we like to ask our guests is, can you define hash?
Yeah. So a couple of years back, I saw sort of an interview with Frenchie Cannoli, and he was talking about I lived in the mountains in Nepal in a cave with these people for like 7 seasons straight. They were some of the first people to really understand that the magic of the plant is in the resin gland. And so that's kind of where I draw my philosophy from, you know, hash is the essence of the plant. It's what provides the medicinal value. It's what provides all the utility really for our kind of consumption that the plant has. And so that gives you a really broad view, you know. Hash is hash, rosin is hash, BHO is hash, fucking RSO is hash. If you really want to stretch it, you could probably say distillate is hash. If you really want to push it.
I agree.
It's the essence of the plant. You know, one form or another, it's what keeps us all really coming back to it in the end for one reason or another.
Well, with that answer, Amy, you are welcome back anytime.
I was gonna say, welcome back to Welcome to be the new regular guest.
Yeah, our interview is complete. Oh, that's great. We actually, this I'm going to shift gears a little bit here before we wrap up, but we did have a question here, and I'm just going to throw this out to anybody because this is an interesting one. So, guys, I have a question. Basic plant biology does not know what a plant uptakes. So, why would we feed a plant synthetic nutrients that we do not know how much it is uptaking?
Define synthetic.
Well, I'm not sure this person's gonna be around to
Whoa,
answer that
so that's-
specifically, but I would assume they're talking, the typical bottled nutrients that
Generally,
To
they
me-
mean non-organic. So,
To
I
me,
gotta
it
put
really
that
depends on how you define synthetic. Like, I have a little knowledge on the human end of how nutrients work. There are synthetic nutrients that are used for things like fortification of foods. Those are actually harder for many people's bodies to process. Does it apply to the plants? I don't know. I don't know enough, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did. But it really depends. How do you mean synthetic?
are you talking about like enriched wheats and stuff like that?
Yeah, like for an easy
Those
example,
enzymes or
folic
whatever.
acid is the synthetic of folate, B9. And a lot of people with the MTHFR mutation, they'll struggle to process it, sometimes all the way down to like 50% deficiency or worse. And does it apply to cannabis? I don't know. Has anyone studied it? I would love to see.
I highly doubt there hasn't been those studies done, but yeah, I don't know if I have an answer to this question. I mean,
I have a lot more questions before I could answer the question.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to put this question into ChatGPT and figure out it. Then I might be able to answer it.
I feel like a basic way to chase this though is just by, if you really don't know how much it's uptaking, can't we kind of see that through like runoffs with DC and stuff?
I mean, what you're measuring is the conductivity of what's coming off of your pots. You're not seeing how much of one solid.
But with data points over time, couldn't you figure that out?
You can figure out a general amount of what it's taking.
Can't figure out
you
what it's
figure out the
uptaking.
ratio.
Right.
Fair enough.
You can't tell
Because you don't
what's
know.
left.
That's something that people miss a lot of times, is how ionic nutrients actually transfer between the cell walls of the roots, and how osmosis works and how plants drink. It's a fascinating topic to get into, but we definitely don't have time for me to start.
Yeah, I mean,
we need a plant
the real
biologist.
answer is like, as soon as Meter Group comes up with a water probe that goes into stone wool or a cocoa pot, it tells you exactly what of which ion is available. Then we're making our best guess based on how much total fertilizer is coming out of the plant when it's watered.
How much?
That's how we know how
cost?
much the plant is uptaking. In terms of whether it's synthetic or not is a different topic.
Fair enough. Well, thank you guys for helping answer that question. Amy, do you have anything you'd like to plug other than obviously your website, highspy.io?
Gosh,
Can we see the
no,
cat?
I don't have socials or anything like that. This
Yeah,
is
can we get a cat tax?
Oh yes, hi cat. Can you come here? Kitty, please, sweetie, work with me. Oh, here's the creature.
Hell
The
yeah.
creature.
He's not happy being here.
Well, we appreciate him.
You're famous now, cat. Congratulations.
So yeah, everyone check out highspy.io. It's an incredibly valuable tool, not just in Michigan, but clearly across the country. Sorry, but if you're like Canada adjacent, not there yet.
It's on the agenda somewhere. I've been asked about it.
Once they hear about it, man, you're gonna be the doors will be knocked down. Trust me.
It is very fun to play with your area and slicing the data and seeing what stuff looks like.
Yeah, very awesome tool. Love the ethics behind it. Love the tool itself. Keep that thing going. Keep doing what you're doing. RacerX, what about you? You got anything to plug?
Nothing that I'm allowed to plug on the streaming services. We're here, but you can always find me on Instagram. I'll tell you where to find some cool shit.
There you go. Appreciate you guys' time, both of you.
Yeah.
And after the show, you can find us on Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. I just, got to remember to upload it. We'll see you guys next time.